You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
My name is Terrence Doyle.
And I'm Chris Lopez. You probably know us from the BiggerPockets Real Estate Ride Along Show. Well, now we're talking everything multifamily. We bring in top industry experts from around the country to come join us in our Denver studio for an in-depth, in-person conversation.
We're going to be diving deep into deals, underwriting, raising capital, and everything in between. Join the conversation.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another show of the Tribe of Multifamily Mentors here at BiggerPockets. Chris Lopez here. I've got my co-host, Terrence Doyle. Terrence, how's it going, man?
Awesome. Chris, super excited to be here. It's a brisk day outside. It's warm in the new studio. We have an awesome guest today, and so I'm really excited to have this, our conversation.
Yeah, so who do we have in the studio here with us? Who's this guy?
So Adam Riddle, who I've actually done a couple deals with, done a lot with his brokerage. Adam Riddle has been a broker for 14 years in Denver. So he started out in the middle of a recession and has seen a bunch of growth since then. He was a broker, currently is a broker, then started a brokerage on his own, Nexus, which just merged with Capstone. He's going to go into that. And so Adam, awesome to have you on the show. We've been talking a lot about podcast and social media, and so it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's start off. I think a great place to start is, tell us about your background and how you got into being a broker.
Sure. So at this point in my life, it's a little bit of a longer story, but grew up in Texas, was a baseball player, had the opportunity to play at University of Nebraska, made my way to Colorado, and still blame that on my parents. They took me here when I was young, and so it was always a dream to live here. Did the ski bum thing for 4 years up in the mountains, kind of took a break from the
rat race,
the structured life of college athletics. And as long as I could pay my way, my parents said, I don't care what you do. And then made my way down to the city, if you will, to find a real job. Real estate was always something I was interested in and intrigued in. High ceiling and, work hard and reap the benefits of it. And didn't know really what that meant. I didn't know what multifamily was, other than obviously lived in an apartment throughout my life. Saw an ad on Craigslist for a cold caller for a multifamily team, and didn't know what cold caller meant, and just decided that was something. It said it had a high income potential.
That's not exactly the sexiest title, cold caller.
Yeah, not a great resume builder, but no, just put the resume in and got an interview with them. I think my sports background probably was something that they liked, and something actually we as a company will definitely put you at the top of our list on a resume, is having a sports background. But interviewed with them and ended up getting hired, and got a phone and a database, and got told to make a bunch of phone calls and kind of get out of the way, and was fortunate enough to get with some good people that I got to learn the business with. And after about 10 years at that company, just decided it was time for a change. Nothing wrong with the company, just wanted something that was a little more entrepreneurial. And so my business partner and I, Jason Koch, started Nexus a little less than 4 years ago. Just me and him, and Wallace, she had her Jerry Maguire moment. It's like, I'm going with you when we were leaving.
That's cool.
Literally was like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
She's like, I'm not saying it, I'm going with you. All right, cool, let's go. So we started Nexus and kind of tried to lay it out exactly how we wanted it. The good we learned from the old company, some of the bad, and how we wanted it to look, and exactly how many people we felt like would be a synergistic team, and started building it and launched it. And today, as of last week, have now merged with a company off the East Coast that was by no means in the cards when we started all this, but the opportunity presented itself. And I have a philosophy that I will always hear somebody out on any potential opportunities. And we felt like it was an opportunity for us to go from something we thought was really good to potentially being something that's really great. So that's, the strategicness behind it was joining some very like-minded individuals and hoping we all win more business together.
Yeah, it's a fascinating background. And I just saw the news article on the merger. So congrats.
Thank you.
Even though I don't totally understand the brokerage business, I know that that's a big deal for you and everything you guys have built. So kudos to you guys. And excited to see how you guys continue to build the team that you've started and in that brokerage space. So I think one of the interesting things is that, in social media and kind of in the news, you see these massive sales prices in multifamily, and it looks like really sexy to be a broker. But I think one of the things that most people don't understand is that really the foundation to it is cold calling. So walk me through, when you're hiring someone and training them, how you instill that like what you're seeing on the news or on social media or the internet about these brokers with nice cars and making all this money. But the fundamental piece of it is really, you have to get on the phone and just grind.
That's probably the best description of what you do as a young broker, is grind, that most people don't quite understand. To your point, I think everybody from CU's real estate school calls us on their way out because they want a job. They have no idea what that means,
right.
And the effort that it takes to get there. And even some of my personal friends, and I'm sure other brokers that, have had success in this business, personal friends are like, what do you do? It's just like, you get to go out to dinner and go on some trips. And like, yeah, but I'm also up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And, you also didn't see me 14 years ago before
right.
I was married and had kids, and the amount of hours that goes into it. And it's prospecting. I'm not from this town. I didn't even know neighborhoods, much less have relationships in this town to start off with. I had just moved down from the mountains. And so, some people are maybe more fortunate than that, and they grow up here, maybe have some connections in the industry to reach out to. I was not one of them. And we're talking about millions of dollars worth of real estate and some very big financial decisions for people. So gaining people's trust does not happen overnight. And I think that's the biggest entry to barrier in commercial in general. Is we all know a bunch of people that probably have a home, that have an opportunity to buy or sell a home, very quickly if you get your license. I didn't know a lot of people that owned a $3 million apartment building when I got started in this business. And so understanding how to go talk to those people, try to add value to those people, build a relationship with those people, and build trust with them, that when that time comes for them to sell that building, that you're the person that they're going to trust. And you've got to put a lot of lines in the water to make that happen. And it's a lot of rejection. Mm-hmm. You've got to be okay with no, you got to be okay with being hung up on. You've got to leave a lot of messages. And I used to get calls back, and you've called me 10 times and left messages. So at some point I just feel like I had to call you back. And that was just I was just going to call you until you called me back.
Yeah. So put some color around that. So you could swap out the name broker with just cold caller, because that's really what it is starting out. And then you start out in 2007. So right when the sky's falling, everything's crashing, tons of bankruptcy all around you, liquidity dries up, almost no financing from banks. So you're dialing 300, 400, 500 dials a week. And how many of those people are hanging up on you, cussing you out? I mean, how much? Just give us some color to how much rejection that really was early on.
90%.
So out of every 100 calls, 90% are hanging up on you and you get nothing.
Hang up or leave a message. And then if you get 10 people on the phone, 5 of those are less than 30 seconds. Like you may have 3 to 5, longer than a minute conversation.
And in those 30 seconds, what are you saying? So, and no one's answering, you're leaving messages, someone actually picks up. So Joe Smith's on the other line. And what is in 2007, what's the first 30 seconds look like?
There's still people active in the market. It kind of depends on the person, obviously. If they've owned it for a long time and they've got equity built up, you're saying one thing. If somebody bought it last year and they're probably underwater at that point, hey, we've got good connections with the banks in town, and we've been able to negotiate short sales. And if you're wanting to get out but don't think you can because you're underwater, we've been able to successfully help owners out in that regard. So a little bit different pitch depending on the call you're making, and what you're doing that day, because you got to change the pitch up, because you can't say the same thing over and over and over and over again, which we practice in our office to try to change your pitch up. But really, sometimes it's just, we just sold this property down the street and I want to let you know, because there's still transactions going on, especially in 08, 09. You're watching the news and the world's falling apart. We're still moving deals. Mm-hmm. Are they a struggle? Are they a grind? Yes, 100%. Are they challenging? Yes, but we were still putting deals together. And honestly, a lot of shops in town weren't. And some of that was our creativity and ability to be flexible on a lot of different things. But we were still able to put deals together when a lot of other people weren't.
So give me an example of a creative, because I've heard stories of some of the guys on your team were taking cars in exchange for a fee, and, taking other real estate property in exchange for a fee. What are some of the creative things that you were seeing at that time when there was no liquidity, a lot of people were upside down? What are some of the things you guys were doing just to give an example to the audience.
We did a lot of short sales. Obviously, we did bank-owned deals.
So walk the audience through a short sale. So someone owes 1.5 million. They bought it 12 months ago. When in 2006 the economy was going up, tons of rent was going up. 2007 rents are going the other way. So what they owe 1.5, and you're calling them saying it's worth $1 million. So what do you do from there?
Obviously, get their bank in contact, which at that time was another challenge in and of itself, because banks were going out of business, and then this person would buy this person's assets, and then trying to get to like the actual right person was almost more challenging than anything to actually get a decision maker.
Like who actually held the debt.
Right. Like who is it?
Right.
Like you can look at chain of title and do all these different things, and to get to the actual person was somewhat of a challenge. So we did a lot of title work searches and things like that. And then hopefully we have the right contact wherever that, light at the end of the tunnel was, and go explain to them why this is an asset that's not worth what their debt is, and show them comps and show them what's going on with the rent roll. And you can sell this now and take a loss on this. Or you can wait to foreclose on this person, and it's probably going to be in worse shape with worse rents, with worse vacancy and more vandalism in 6 to 9 months if you just hold on to it and let this person ride it out. So trying to just explain kind of what's going on in the market and see if they're realistic on where they're at. And most people at that point, they had bought portfolios of these things, and they weren't to hold. They were to try to figure out how to negotiate. They got them at a discount. If the debt was $1.5 million, they bought them the debt at $700,000. So there's usually more room than met the eye on from the debt holder at that point. So we just were trying to negotiate as much as we could with the owner and with the bank. And then sometimes the buyer wouldn't have as much liquidity to, they were scraping together every last penny to get the down payment. And broker's always the last one to get paid in a lot of deals. And so we took a free and clear condo as payment one time.
In Colorado or like in
Colorado.
Mexico? Oh.
No, it was here.
That seems like a pretty good value.
I mean,
you guys could rent it. I mean, it wasn't liquid, but you could rent it or cash flow.
We could rent it. I think
refinance maybe.
I think there was a tenant in there, so you had to rent it out for a little bit, and then we sold it, and it worked out. We still got paid. We carried our fees, and we charge
what does that mean?
If
the fee was $50,000, you guys would just say pay us $500 a month.
Yeah, for 5 years at 4% interest. Or
no
whatever.
way.
We would just get a small check every month.
Your fee.
Yeah, because there was no room in the deal to pay a fee. Wow. Like we were, a lot of times we were getting right on what the balance of the loan was. So it was like there is no equity here to pay you.
So that's a horrible time to be a broker then.
Terrible.
I mean, there's not even a room in deals for brokers to get paid, and no one had the capital or the liquidity to pay brokers.
No.
So you're amortizing your fee. So you think, so when you're closing a deal now, young guys are looking forward to like a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 check. So at that point, there was no because you go all this time because there's no salary, right?
Nope.
There's no salary. So you're going all this time to get like big chunks of capital. And back then they were amortized. You were just spreading that out. So you just take a $500 a month check versus a $40,000 fee.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
I mean, we didn't try to do that every time.
But that's what you had to do just to get paid.
That was the difference in between getting paid zero or getting paid a little bit a month. We were going to do it.
And they would make good on that?
And all of them made good on it.
Wow, cool.
I mean, obviously the market turned around and things got better and people got a chance to refi and put better debt on. And, but obviously it was better at the time to have a listing of a bank that was a real seller that was really going to pay you and, do those sorts of things.
Wow.
But you had to get creative. And that was, we did wraps of mortgages where essentially...
No idea what that is.
You've never heard of a wrap?
No, I don't know what a wrap is.
So it's basically you're assuming that somebody else's mortgage without the lender knowing.
So hold on. So you guys were assuming debt without the debt holder knowing?
It's basically like a master lease of the property. And with obviously attorneys involved, but it was just another creative way to kind of get a seller, not necessarily off the debt, but letting somebody else come in and maybe infuse some capital into the deal that the current owner just doesn't have, with the goal of in 6 to 12 months, putting that capital in, getting it back to good occupancy and good operations and be able to refi them out. And then obviously we didn't get paid at the beginning. We got paid on the end, and then sometimes that didn't work out. And so.
Wow. And was there any liability for the new owner coming in there and doing that wrap with the current debt holder? If they, because I guess they're coming in and putting fresh equity, so I guess they're doing them a favor, right?
Yeah, I mean the for the seller, the owner, current owner, worst case scenario, they get a property back that's got a couple $100,000 put into it,
right?
And they're hopefully in a better position than they were before,
right?
But those are complicated and definitely attorneys and a lot of different things involved there. But
never heard of that.
Yeah,
wild.
Very, very different world than it is today.
Totally different world.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you, I'm going to kind of take a step on 90-degree turn here, Adam. You mentioned sports background. I mean, Terrence and I talk about this a lot. I've played sports growing up. Terrence played sports growing up a lot. You have played sports growing up a lot. And that's a very common theme that we see in entrepreneurship and in real estate. Like, what do you say to people out there that play sports? How can they leverage that background into being successful? Because you said you look for it. I look for it. I think you look for people you hire too, Terrence. Like, what advice do you have for people to leverage that team sports background into why they make a good broker or good real estate entrepreneur? I
would say if you're reaching out, highlight that. Do not put that maybe at the very bottom. If you're in any industry that's more entrepreneurial, insurance or whatever, any sort of sales job, I would highlight that background. For us, it's self-starter, team player, or two of the big things, and typically, obviously, understand what work ethic is, and so I always say I don't care if it's high school sports. You don't have to be a professional athlete to have the attributes of an athlete, and you don't have to be a collegiate athlete. Right. Like you played collegiate sports, like we one of our interview questions has nothing to do with professional or collegiate sports. It's just like, what sports did you play and why did you like playing them? Why do you think you excelled at those sports? We just want to hear kind of some of those answers about their sports background. And there's a lot of things you can teach in this business, but you can't teach some of those just those traits of self-starters. Or people being competitive. We do contests internally all the time with brokers, and I don't care if it's $20 or $1,000, they want to win. Yep. And that's just a natural thing, is they want to win. And competitiveness is a big part of being an entrepreneur, and you want to win. And so that's something we've always looked for in doing our hires. And something else, because you have an exceptional story where you were living up the mountains for a while you were young and enjoying all that, came down, became a commercial broker, which has a high attrition rate, became a successful broker, started your own firm. Now, you're emerging. You've had a wonderful career trajectory. What advice do you have for people starting there? Actually, maybe ask it differently. What great mentors along the way do you have as you're a brand new broker? Because this is a big part of the theme of the show we're doing here is like, mentors you've had along the way and people you mentored, but who have been some great mentors along the way as you started out from, hey, you're brand new cold calling? I don't mean in real estate, they really know what to do, but who gave you great advice along the way? My two senior brokers at the time that hired me were my mentors for a long time. Obviously in understanding the business, but not understanding the business alone, also understanding just money and leveraging money and understanding money and the power of money. And, not only for, you personally, as you begin to make some more money, but understanding you're talking to people about a lot of money. So you have to understand money. I don't come from, a lot of money, and we were a middle-class family, and we didn't talk about money a lot. As I'm sure a lot of people growing up didn't really talk a lot about money. And so understanding just how to multiply money and multiply equity and deals, and what does a cash on cash mean? And it just so many of those different things, and how to build relationships with people and add value to them at the end of the day. And so they were great mentors for a long time, and kind of this new venture that started about 4 years ago. I'm very gracious enough to have a very solid group of friends. Actually, a lot of them are still from my days as a ski bum. Most of them went on to start their own businesses and are very successful at what they do in different industries. And we get together and have a beer, or have a coffee, and just talk business and talk shop and struggles, and whether it's hiring or, budgeting or whatever the case may be. And so we still keep in touch, and we still do a lot of business talk, and those guys are all successful in their own right. And so they continue to be mentors. And then meeting people in this industry that you meet, and they're a client at the time, but end up becoming your friends, and they're very successful. And maybe they had a previous career to real estate, and now they're in real estate. And I just love sitting down with people and picking their brain. You started this company. What happened? How did you grow it? Why did somebody buy it? Why are you still involved in it? Why are you buying real estate now? I've always been an inquisitive person in that regard. And I just like to pick people's brains, and people have been nice enough to help my partner and I in the last 4 years kind of on this journey of starting our company and now getting to this point of a merger. And, I've been a big believer in business coaches for a long time. I had business coach even before we had our own business, to just continue to have accountability and different benchmarks that we're trying to hit, and somebody to keep you accountable to that. So, that's always been a help for us is from the sports background, somebody helping you out as a coach.
What do you mean by business coach? Like this is like a paid consultant or paid coach that you're meeting with once a month, once a quarter? Like, what do you mean by that?
So obviously can't afford that sometimes when you start out in the business.
Yep.
But at a certain point, we felt necessary, as we were growing our team at our previous shop, that we needed some outside perspective, somebody that's not in the weeds every day. So we went and found just a business coach, and it was more of a sounding board than anything, than a we're going to sit here and go through your business plan and your budgeting and stuff like that. Just more of a sounding board for us. And we've kind of kept that, obviously different iterations of that over the years. And, but it's for us today, it's a monthly call. And, sometimes it is about marketing. What are we doing for marketing, and making sure we're dialed in on that. Sometimes it's budgets. Sometimes it is a little more granular details, but a lot of the times, especially in the last 6 months of this merger, it was what's going on and how are you guys handling it, and what questions do you have, and different things of that nature. And I meet with a lot of people that are trying to get in the business, and obviously we can't hire everybody that's trying to get in the business, but my advice to anybody is just make sure that you have somebody that's senior to you that's going to spend time with you. That doesn't mean they're going to spend 40 hours a week with you, sit next to you all day, but is going to actually make a concerted effort to spend time with you and mentor you in your daily grind of what this business is. Because without that, this business is too hard. It is too hard. Maybe small percentage of people will figure it out on their own, but if you don't have somebody that's actually trying to help and mentor you, it's a tough business to make happen.
You touched on two things that I think are super interesting that I'm passionate about. So the first thing, the show is called The Tribe of Multifamily Mentors. So Chris and I are firm believers in having mentors to help guide you, to give you wisdom, advice, experience, and just lend their resources, when you need them. I mean, that's what life is all about. Coming from team sports, that's what being a part of a team is all about. So I think one of the things that really stood out to me that I think is important for the audience to understand, regardless of where they're at in their investing career, is if you want to attract really strong mentors, you have to learn how to ask great questions. Adam touched on that of, every month they have different questions they're asking their coach, but people are going to be drawn to you, and they're going to want to help you and kind of give you a hand up if you know how to ask great questions. That's something that Tim Ferriss talks a ton about that I love, is just how to craft thoughtful questions, and people are really drawn to that. So that's one thing that I think you touched on that we should emphasize. The next one is financial literacy, understanding money. I think I was homeschooled growing up and went to private, Christian schools, high school and college. And I think that our public educational system, one of the reasons I think that it's failing is financial literacy. The next generation, and even I feel like the way I grew up, coming from a similar background, just lower middle class, blue collar, my parents didn't understand money. They didn't understand debt. They didn't understand arbitrage. They didn't understand any of these things. And understanding how money works is such a powerful tool. And it's really comes down to, my eyes have been opened just through the mentors I've had, that have been directors and, private equity companies or Morgan Stanley. And just, when you get around money, your eyes are kind of open to like how it really works. And then it kind of self-perpetuates just the growth and accelerates, kind of more doors being opened. But that's something that everybody really needs to understand, regardless of what industry you're in or what asset class. Obviously, if you're listening to the show, you're most likely in multifamily, but if you want to grow your multifamily business, you have to understand debt. You have to understand returns, multiples, all these fundamental terms of money. And I love that you touched on that. And that's what they were teaching you, because even though you were cold calling, they're really kind of teaching you the language of money. If you can talk to someone that owns a $2, $3, $4 million building and you can articulate to them how money's going to work or how they can save money or get a better return immediately, even if you've never owned a $4 million building, if you can show someone or explain to someone what to do with the money that they haven't thought of before, you're going to be able to do anything you want. You have instant credibility.
Yeah.
Instant credibility.
100%.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I love that.
So let me ask you, I got one more question before we can jump on the deal here. What advice do you have for people out there to seek mentors, whether they're a commercial broker, working their way up, or just in general? Because I attribute a lot of my success to mentors, and I've got my secret sauce used to go out there and find mentors. What advice do you have out there for people wanting to get into real estate, no matter what facet? Like, how do they find mentors and show that value and develop a relationship with that person, not just buy them a cup of coffee once, but actually have a real relationship?
A lot of companies have mentorship programs. Touting ours a little bit, but we internally have a mentorship program that we hook up some of the newer guys with some of the senior guys, and they meet on a monthly basis and kind of have questions to go through. And it's pipeline and prospecting, but it's, how's your personal finances doing? Have you set up an S Corp to run your commissions through and be able to write off your home office? And, some of those financial literacy things. And some of the bigger shops definitely have that. And that's kind of, where we stole the model from, if you will. And honestly, I think just, there's no secret sauce. I think if you reach out to people and you're genuine, and, it's always nice to have a connection to that person that you're reaching out to, whether it's a friend of a friend, or, if you're young and it's maybe an acquaintance of one of your parents, and, reaching out and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, and I would love the opportunity to have you as my mentor. Most people that are successful in any sort of business want to get back to someone and spend their time teaching and trying to give their knowledge to the next generation. Not everybody, but there's a good chunk of them. And that's why, almost every CU grad that does reach out to me, I'll at least go get a cup of coffee with them. And tell them my experience and what I think of the business and the pros and cons, because there's pros and cons to our business. It's not an easy business, and it's not for everybody. To your point earlier, it looks very, very sexy from the outside, but it's not that sexy sometimes. And it's a grind, and you don't make a lot of money for a while. And so I think finding somebody that you look up to in the industry, and it doesn't have to be your exact industry, obviously. I think for me, almost it's seeing people from different industries, because they bring a different perspective. Sometimes talking to people that do what I do every day kind of gets monotonous. And so I want to go talk to somebody else that maybe does something a little more creative than what I do and has a different thought process of how they look at things. So I don't think there's a secret sauce. I just think you got to put the time and effort into it, just like you're putting the time and effort into prospecting. And you got to put some time and effort into finding a mentor. And sometimes that's a lifelong mentor. Sometimes it's somebody that gets you kind of that next level, and that's great. And then you got to put the time and effort into the next mentor. So it's something that I think everybody should pay more attention to than they probably do. But I think it's very important if you want to continue to grow in your career.
Very well said. I was nodding my head the whole time you were talking.
Yeah, it's well said. Well said. So let's dive into this deal. So we're here with Adam Riddle, partner at Capstone Brokerage, one of the top brokerages in the Mountain region, also on the East Coast, based out of North Carolina. Now they have headquarters here in Denver. Adam's been a 14-year broker, done hundreds of multifamily deals, started in 2007, so he's seen a lot. And we're going to go over a 14-unit deal in Lakewood, Colorado. Those of you that are not familiar with Lakewood, it's just a strong suburb of Denver. So Adam, tell us about the deal. Tell us how you found it. Tell us who the buyer was and how it went through the acquisition process.
So like you said, 14 unit, typical suburb. I believe it's 1960s, 1970s, which for Colorado at least is a very popular time for kind of sub 100 unit apartment projects. Found it through Cold calling. Actually, one of our brokers in the office actually had a relationship with these guys that sold some buildings for them. They were redeploying capital up in northern Colorado to kind of where they lived, and they were trying to kind of move everything up there a little closer to home. Kind of got tired of the commute down to Denver. Very nice people. I'd owned it for a long time. We're more of the adage of not putting money back into it, kind of taking all the profits out. So it needed a lot of work. And so that at the time was detracting to some people. We had done some transactions with this particular client, value add. He had performed, obviously, which is very important. A lot of these deals we get one shot at.
So walk us through what perform means from your perspective, because I think that's really important for the audience to understand. You had a deal, it was outdated. Mm-hmm. There was room to, through construction, increase rents. So when you say you had one shot, you had one shot to call one group to take it down. Otherwise, they're going to take it to someone else. So walk me through what you mean perform, because everyone wants that deal. Everyone listening wants to be that group that you're calling. So
perform to me means we had sold them another deal, and the process had gone as smooth as it could have gone, and they closed.
Okay.
Right. Just because it's been put under contract doesn't mean it's closed, and or it's a pain. Right. It's a pain to get it to the closing table. Right. So they had performed. They had proved that they could buy a value add deal and not get so stuck on the in-place numbers, because some people get so stuck on the in-place numbers. And they had proved that they can get a loan for something that this wasn't it was a 3 cap or a 2 cap, whatever it was. It was not a cap rate deal. And some people get very caught up on what the cap rate is going in. Not that you shouldn't look at the cap rate by all means, not suggesting that, but they had proved that they could get a value add deal financed, that they could look past what the current rents were and the current condition and kind of see the upside in the deal with transacting with them before. So that was kind of the keys to us is like, here's the current rent roll. Don't care, on a true value add.
So they
deal.
understood the opportunity. They weren't getting stuck on, metrics that people look at, which is, the T12 or current cap rate or any of that. Yep. So they understood the opportunity. Another thing you touched on, which I think is really key, is that they could get debt for a deal that maybe didn't meet the DSCR requirements from a bank, the debt service covenant ratios, right? So they had proved that they understood what the business model needed to execute, and they had the ability to get financing, which are two huge things.
So the ability to get financing, I think, is something that people overlook often.
Right.
Which I've do you know Marcel Arsenault?
No.
Genius, real estate investor here locally.
Okay, cool.
I've heard him speak at conferences here locally, and he said too many investors spend time on raising money. He's like, 75% of the deal is coming from the lender. You better have strong lending relationships.
Right.
Yeah, the investor is important, but that's only 25% of your
that's well said,
of your tranche. Like he's like, I have very good lending relationships. If I've got a good enough deal, the money will come on raising the 25 or 30%, whatever I need to do the deal. I've got to have the banking relationships and backing that I can perform on every deal I put under contract and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So
love it.
So many people get so entrenched on, okay, well, I've got this guy's committed for 100 and this guy's committed for 200, and then I recall a lender.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, now I got a deal. Now I got to go figure out who's going to lend to me.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little backwards in my opinion.
Just a fundamental. Yeah. Fundamental of doing real estate. You have to have strong lending relationships.
Yep. And especially for value add, because
they don't check a lot of boxes.
It does not. It is not going to cover debt coverage ratio. It is not going to. There's no cap rate. There's no cash on cash.
Or the rent roll is probably a mess.
There's there's could be handwritten for that.
Handwritten,
for that
exactly.
matter.
Back of a napkin at Starbucks. Yeah.
So the bank's got to really understand you and your track record and the plan in place.
Yeah.
To be able to execute.
So to summarize for the audience, because I think you just nailed some really important things, is everyone says they want. I mean, how many people call you a week and say they want a value add deal?
Everybody.
Or used to. Everybody wants a value add deal.
95%. Yeah. It's the one that says, hey, I want something really clean at a low cap rate. I'm like, yes, I want to talk to you.
Yeah. So everyone wants the value add deal. You have to have lending relationships, be bankable to be able to overcome some of those objections from a bank. You have to understand that the numbers are not going to look good. You have to understand and be able to overcome the fact that there is no cash flow. There could be no cash flow for 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 months. And then they have to make the process convenient. I think that's the other thing you said, is that they were not, even if they get to the finish line, but they made your life super difficult and you hated every day working with them, you're not going to call them again, right? So they made the process convenient, and and they performed. So they closed. So they closed. They understood what it needed. They had the banking relationships, and that is someone, if they check those boxes during a transaction, you're going to call them again next time you have a value add deal.
100%.
Which is kind of like, this is it. This is I get 5 of these a year. I get 5 opportunities to close on this with a buyer that's a legacy owner, and with some meat on the bone. In a hot market like Denver, and a lot of the country's appreciated, you get very few shots at those kind of deals. And so that's, the audience, that's what you got to be. You have to be able to prove to brokers that you can be that buyer if you want value add deals. Just showing up and calling brokers and telling them what you're looking for and saying you're looking in, we were talking about this earlier, 8 different states, that's not going to get it done. You have to be able to prove that you can check those 4 boxes. So we'll put that in the show notes, but I think that is, rewind that, listen to what Adam said, and that is what you need to be able to prove to a broker if you really truly want a value add deal.
All right, very well. Great recap.
I love it. All right, so let's walk through. So what the rest of the deal? 14 units, a lot of hair on it, didn't pencil out.
Tenants in place, not great rents. Roof patch with plywood, single family hot water heaters and whatnot in here. So it was single pane windows. So it just need everything.
Every single thing. Mold.
I don't know if that came up.
Pest control.
I'm sure.
Pest control. Roaches, bed bugs.
That's a lot of them these days.
What were the average rents? And do you remember? Was $600? $500?
Probably $600 to $700.
And the market was like 1,000.
What? This was 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Okay.
So it's not like it was a steal by all means. I want to reiterate that.
She's in baseball terms, a single, double, triple, home run, grand slam for the buyer.
Since they just exited, I think it was a grand slam for.
But at
investors.
the time you buy.
But at the time, it's like this is a good double.
Okay.
Who knew in 4 years we're selling these for $200 a door versus $100 a door. And Central Denver is going for $230 to $250 for 100-year-old buildings. Like, nobody knew that. And everybody that looks back are like, man, I wish I would have bought everything in 20ing. I'd have so much money. Single family or otherwise.
Anything.
Just could have bought any dirt. Sort of real estate.
Anything.
Dirt. Office buildings, retail, whatever. Right. You would have made money. So a big value add, a big lift that, a lot of due diligence and a lot of obviously budgeting out what this is all going to cost.
So one of the things I'm always interested in is, what did they go under contract for? And then what was the inspection like? And then how did the inspection objection go? Because that's really, in my opinion, where brokers can make or break deals. I determine how good a broker is by, you go through a really tough inspection. There's a bunch of surprises, things that maybe they didn't disclose, because there's always going to be, especially legacy owners, or they just maybe don't even remember how bad some of the units were, how bad the sewer line is. So to me, the top brokers are the ones that, on a really tough conversation on the inspection, can hold the deal together and help get the number that's needed to make the deal work. So walk me through what you went under contract for, how the inspection process went, and that conversation on the objection.
Those are very details that I don't totally
I know there's
remember.
A lot of time that's passed.
4 years.
Just give us a brief summary.
Couple things
or maybe even make a couple things up. It's fine.
No. No, I remember some of those details. Okay. On the brokerage side, there are certain things that obviously I think, you see when you're walking through, and maybe you don't know exactly what that's going to cost as a buyer, but it's like, hey, you see the units need to be renovated. Yeah. Right? Like,
don't come back with flooring.
Yeah. No, the flooring is going to cost $20,000. Well, you knew that going into it.
Right.
So, my philosophy as a broker is the more detail, the better on being able to present to a seller and having a better shot at actually getting, a discount. And that's real proposals and real bids from people, and then trying to package that together in a nice, clean, easy to read. Hey, these guys want to buy this property. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff here that came up that is needed. And here's bids to back everything up. We're not just making this up. We're not just pulling numbers out of the sky. Here's real bids to back all of these numbers up. And this is going to come up whether it's this guy or the next guy. If you've got a bad roof, it's going to come up. Mm-hmm. Yep. If you've got a bad sewer line, it's going to come up. So just trying to understand, but also be empathetic, obviously, with their situation. A lot of times this is this is their nest egg.
Yeah.
And it's
Good
not,
point.
it's not some institutional person that's just,
Right.
IRR driven for investors. This is their money, and every dollar counts to them.
Right.
And so you've got to kind of walk that tightrope of being empathetic to the situation. And a lot of these people think they took great care of their property, and so you have to understand, and you have to remember that first conversation and that first walk around the property with that person, and what some of their individual ticks, whether it's they're tired of coming down here. So you got to be able to bring that up during the negotiations, but you got to remember that from the first conversation, that's a hot button for them.
Right.
And we preach that, like, take notes, because we're, I'm getting older. I got
so many deals
losing
going on
my
at the same
memory,
time.
and deals and stuff going on that I can't remember everything. So I've got to take notes in our database so that I can recall those at a later time. And then, on the buy side, I would always preach to a buyer to really ask for stuff that you want. Like, there may be 15 things that you want, but can we focus on the top 7 or 8 that are really big ticket items? And maybe these, you're going to do these, but maybe these are smaller dollar amounts, and maybe they're more questionable, if you will. Versus nothing against residential, but I've done a few residential, and they just send over a list of like 35 things, and I'm just like, I'm out. Like, I don't even care what those 35
Just
things
a laundry
are.
list.
I'm out.
I hate the laundry list.
I mean, you can't just copy and paste the inspection report.
Yeah, exactly. So, really trying to concentrate on the big ticket items. A reverse polarized outlet, not overly concerning. Like, do you have to spend? You have to do a new roof. Are the windows all broken? Is the boiler broken? Is the sewer pipe cracked? And you got to do that. Like, electric panels, or Zinsco or Federal Pacific, one of those bad terms in the insurance world. There's just so many bigger ticket items to like chase after, that I think if you focus on the bigger ticket items, you have a better shot at getting, versus doing those plus 1,000 little things that are like, this is $2,500.
Right.
Like, then
it's going to overwhelm the seller, and they're just going to want to tap out.
Yeah.
Right.
The immediate response. And that's the other thing in negotiation for me, is I always call right after inspection. I tell them how it went. I'm like, I don't know what they're going to ask for, but here's what I heard. Here's what the inspector was saying. So then when we get to the actual objection, it's not the first time they're hearing it. And then I never try to get an answer the day of, because it's always a, middle finger.
Shock value. Yeah.
So let everybody sleep on it for a day. So, there's a little
art to that, for sure.
Little art,
yeah,
methodology, if you will, behind the negotiation. And then obviously sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And that's a bummer, but we try to do everything we can to, at the end of the day, it has to work for everybody. It can't work for just one side. It's got to work for everybody, and everybody's got to feel like they're getting a fair shake at it. And
yeah, empathy is a word you used, which I know you and I have talked about before. You have to put yourself in their position, so you have to understand obviously what the buyer's goals are, but you also have to understand the seller and what their triggers are, like you talked about, and what their life situation is, and try and put yourself in their situation. So on this deal, do you remember at all, like, what was the inspection objection, what that conversation went like, and what you were able to get off of that, and what the buyers asked for versus what they actually got?
No, I think they asked for a couple $100,000, and we ended up at like 150.
Wow,
my recollection, which was big at the time.
Which is huge. That's like 10% of the sales price.
What was the purchase price?
1.5 was the purchase price. So I think we started in the 165, 1.7 range. And I think a little bit of that had to do with, we had already talked to lenders, and lenders, were coming back like, this is troublesome. This is troublesome. And educating them on all the work that needs to be done. And yes, some of that's cosmetic, and just like buying a house, like, great, the you don't like the kitchen counters, but the kitchen counters are perfectly fine. They're granite or whatever. Just because you don't like the color doesn't mean I should credit
the seller needs to pay for that. Yeah.
So but there was very legitimate big ticket items that needed to be done, that were not necessarily apparent on the initial walkthrough, that was backed up with documented bids. And again, I think it was a strategic decision and by them, and sometimes on the buyer side, it's a little bit of like willing to take a risk and go hard on some earnest money. So there's a little more surety of closing at that time after an inspection. So there's always that.
Talk about that more, because that's a very nuanced tactic there. So talk about going hard on earnest money to get the deal done.
So a lot of people do that regularly after inspection. and obviously not happening in 08, 09, 2010 because lenders were so
You wanted every out possible, right?
volatile at the time.
Yeah.
Now people are confident enough in the lending world that they can get debt that they are comfortable going hard on earnest money after an inspection. That can set you apart. That can set you apart if you're competing. Hey, I want to do an inspection. I'm going to do it quickly, and I'm going to go hard on earnest money very quickly thereafter.
And what does going hard mean, so everyone out there knows?
Well, it's probably different in different states, but here it's essentially your earnest money being non-refundable at that point. But that can be structured in a couple different ways. Some more savvy sellers will actually ask for it to be released to them. Where others, it's just, technically it's hard, but it's still sitting at the title company in their escrow account. And then if something happens, it's
A legal battle.
a little fight because the title company's not going to release it without all parties agreeing to it. So it's a little, we had some earnest money negotiations, if you will, during the beginning of COVID, and we were not negotiating for a fee. We were negotiating other people's money for them, which is always not a fun topic to have, but everybody ended up being reasonable and walking away happy. But so going hard is essentially your earnest money going hard. And some people will even do like, hey, my earnest money plus some, I'm going to put up additional earnest money after our physical inspection to give you a surety of closing. Because the last thing, especially if it's a hard retrade, a substantial retrade, the last thing a seller wants is to be like, if I say yes, in 3 weeks, am I going to go have another conversation and they're going to want something else? Now the lender is coming back and saying debt coverage ratio isn't good. So they're now going to ask for another, $150,000 to get their debt coverage ratio. As a broker, obviously that helps me because I can say, this is the last time you say yes. Last time you say yes.
Next thing you're going to do is be getting a wire on closing day.
Yeah. We're looking at settlement statements next.
Right.
And if they mess up, heaven forbid, then you get some money.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go back to market and we'll find the next person and we'll probably end up netting you higher, more money than you would have netted with this person. So now all the pressure's on the buyer to perform at that point.
So you get through this inspection objection, you get them 150 off, and they end up closing at what, 1.5?
1.5.
1.5. This is 2016.
Yes.
Okay. The deal closes, they get the keys. How involved are you after that, or what's the understanding, their business plan? They're going to go in there and clear the building, or they're doing one by one, or what was the understanding that was going to happen?
My involvement has always been pretty good on the front. I've walked at this point thousands of buildings, especially in the workforce housing, C-class space, whatever you want to call it. So I get renovations. I know,
You've seen enough of them.
I've seen a lot to be able to say, do this, don't do this, unless you have just an incredible resource to be able to do this one thing for cheaper than anybody ever. Don't do that. That's over improving, right?
So you were giving them some advice on what to do to get the best value on the back end.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously different units are different. Even in one complex, this one unit may need a lot more work than this other unit. So walking through there and just saying, hey, this is what I think you should do with these floor plans, whether it's plank flooring and some tile in the bathroom. These cabinets seem pretty good. Maybe just paint them and put some new hardware on them, do some light fixtures and doorknobs. And I think this is a nice, clean place for somebody to live. So involved on that. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's not my money. They can do whatever they want, but try to help guide in that for people, especially this particular client came from the single family world. So he obviously understood renovations and had the crews to do renovations, but had not done a lot of multifamily. This may have been a third, fourth multifamily deal. So trying to help in guiding where's good money to spend, where's bad money to spend. Obviously, you got to do the roof, and there's certain capital expenditure items you just got to do. Mm-hmm. So at that point, everybody they were able to kick out, which is a whole nother thing in apartment buildings. You have to be very careful. I had a client news crews in the front of the building on Denver Post, the whole story of kicking people out of a building, even though they were perfectly legally allowed to kick them out. Gave them 30-day notice, offered to pay for their moving, give them their full security deposit back, no matter what their unit was in their condition. So there is a little tactfulness of how you do that to not end up on the news.
Yeah, it's very sensitive, especially this time, in this kind of current economic, geopolitical environment. I mean, that's, it's almost unheard of right now. I mean, we're super careful in how there's just so many new regulations around that. Even from when I started just 5 years ago, it's completely different when you're dealing with tenants and residents and how to how to help them get into a better place, even if you have the best intentions.
Yeah.
Completely changed.
So you've got to do that the right way, and even with the best intentions, sometimes can get obviously skewed a little bit there.
Sidetracked. Yeah.
But I think the best thing is kind of a phased approach.
Right.
You're kind of doing 2, 3, 4 at a time, and then helping those people. A lot of guys are happy to say, "Hey, we're gonna, these 3 are empty. We're gonna renovate them, and you're a good tenant. You can move in here. Here's the new rent," and give them the option. And then some of them will say, "Hey, I actually can afford that, and I would have loved to have lived in a nicer place."
Yeah, the kids are going to school down the street, and they want to
there.
stay in that neighborhood. Right.
And then some of them just like, I just can't really afford that. Like, I appreciate the offer. We're going to go find some housing somewhere else. And then obviously, working with them on their way out, because that security deposit is not what you're after as the investor, So figuring out how to make them happy on their way out is a huge key. So, empty the building for the most part, and then went to work. So obviously, a decent sized project, not that many units, but when you add in all the, essentially everything needed to be done. The parking lot needed to be done. The landscaping was all trashed. And so, it was a good project.
What was the ballpark renovation cost? Do you remember?
I think it was about 30 to 35 a unit.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a lot of CapEx then.
Yeah. every
Windows,
every
HVAC,
CapEx needed to be
everything.
done.
Wow.
There wasn't one thing that was like, yeah, we can keep that. It was
what was their turn time on all this? From like close to...
I think they did it in like 6-7 months. I mean, it was pretty quick. Like he was from the residential background, so he had the contractors kind of ready to go.
Yeah.
So the cosmetics is easy enough for a crew to go in and do flooring and painting and light fixtures and all
Cabinets,
that.
Yeah.
And then you get your subs to go do a roof and a boiler and those sorts of things, which he had done plenty of those in his day to have good resources to do that and do it fairly quickly. And so it was pretty quick. Then obviously start filling it up. Before then, he's typically calling me and calling his third party property manager, because a lot of people do third party. We pro forma X rents 7, 8, 9 months ago. Are those still the rents today? Are they higher? Are they lower? Or, is there been softening in this particular submarket? So double checking rents before you start going out and asking for rents with us and with their management company, and then filling the building up. At that point, you're on a construction loan.
Right.
So you're typically paying.
So he closed with the local bank then that gave him a construction loan?
Local bank. So they rolled the construction into the deal. It was just I think it was 12 to 18 month IO.
What, 70% of cost or
70% of cost is usually about right for those.
Cool. Yeah.
And again, it's good money for the short amount of time that you need it for.
Right.
And there's the availability of it is actually pretty regular with the local bank, but you got to be able to sign recourse.
Recourse meaning
that if it goes bad, that you're personally liable for that debt.
Yeah, you're truing up with the bank. Yeah, you owe them all. You're gonna have to sell everything until you can make them whole.
So the game plan was to go in there, renovate it, and then refinance it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously as a broker, I said let's stabilize this and sell it. Yeah. That's the ideal thing, right? At the time, just didn't work for them for timing purposes. So they actually went and put agency debt on.
Okay. Even that small of a loan balance? So small balance?
So small balance is kind of in the beginning of the SBL Freddie program.
Small balance, yeah.
And, getting off recourse obviously is a nice thing. And so put SBL on it, but with some flexible prepays. Like a lot of times you can lock into these like long-term prepays, and in 2 years, if you want to sell it, you're kind of screwed yourself. You got a great interest rate. So I had some flexible prepay to where in a few more years would be a good time for him to sell. In the middle of that, he had a management company that went belly up overnight.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
Here locally?
Yes.
Wow.
Had to scramble to go find management. Turns out they were allegedly embezzling money.
Oh, wow.
And putting bad tenants in buildings and not doing credit checks. And so it took 6 to 9 months to kind of undo a lot of that.
Did he take a financial hit on there too, I'm assuming? Like just lost deposits and rent sitting in... And
it wasn't just this building. The guy at this point had managed quite a bit for this particular owner.
Oh, no.
And so he was one of the largest clients of the manager.
Oh.
So it took a little while to kind of undo that. And honestly, when we went to market, the trailing 12 weren't great because of a lot of that. There was still a lot of turnover. There was still a lot of like getting the bad tenants out and the new people in. So yeah, I mean, that was the biggest hurdle when we came out was, price per pound wasn't that bad. The renovations were fine. I mean, at this point, they're 4 years old. Obviously, some tenants are going to beat down interiors, but obviously the windows are done, the roof's done, the boiler's done, like all the big stuff's done. Maybe you want to do some things to units, but it was the trailing numbers were rough. So we had a lot of kind of start and goes with people being like, yep, we're interested. Let's put an offer in, digging into the financials a little bit more, sending them to lenders. It's not working.
So a lot of objections you had to overcome, even though the building was turned.
Was it mostly the lenders objecting to it based off just the T12s or more just the buyers, or do you know?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
And obviously we dealt with it on the front end as much as we could possibly, and tried to highlight obviously a lot of the great things about it. But you really had to have an experienced buyer to understand that the trailing numbers weren't going to look great. Like, and even our numbers I thought were very conservative, which if you're looking at broker numbers, don't ever believe those.
Wait, what? What are you talking about, Adam?
Great advice coming from a broker. Wow. That's huge. Rewind that. I'll have to play that back for you next time you're selling me a deal.
I'll always tell anybody that. But I thought we were pretty conservative with our numbers and, just a market vacancy rate. And we were offering a higher cap rate than a lot of the rest of the market. And I think that's what we were getting a lot of activity based off of. And it took the right buyer to understand that the trailing 12 isn't great. And you had to have a strong banking relationship, even though this is a fixed up asset.
Pretty much turnkey building at this point, right?
It was almost a value add turnkey building.
Wow.
Like somebody had to have a strong balance sheet.
What do you mean by that?
Because the numbers didn't work for usually when we're selling a turnkey building, we're selling the easiness of just walking into something that's already operating great. Yep. Expenses are in
mailbox
line
money
properly,
every month. Yeah.
Had great occupancy for the past 6 to 12 months. Rents are at market, vacancies where it should be. That's what we're typically selling a turnkey asset for, and what the attractiveness of the turnkey asset is. And it was the physicalness of the asset was that the financial of the asset was like a value add deal. It was like, 50% occupied a year ago.
So more just bringing in better management and running out that 6 to 9 month hump of, hey, get these tenants out there, do some other updates and better tenants, better management.
Which then naturally that went into having higher expenses because they had higher turnover at that time and having to do more. And then there was apparently just backlogs of maintenance requests that the previous management company never did anything about. So, it just ran very inefficiently for a while, and it was hard for a lot of people to get past that.
So how did you overcome it then?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, it was a local buyer that had transacted in the market that yes, he looked at the trailing numbers, but it was kind of like, no, I know what this will do.
Because he understood he had buildings in the same zip code, understood the neighborhood, understood kind of the trends of that area, and was like, I don't care what his numbers look like. I have a building here that's been mostly renovated. I just have to do a better job managing it. Yep. So he understood what was needed.
Yeah, exactly. And had a strong enough banking relationship that
the bank believed in him.
The bank was like, like, we're lending to you. You
know what you're doing.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't Fannie or Freddie. It was still another local bank. We got a quote from Freddie SBL, and they were still happy to lend on it at pretty attractive terms, even with kind of some messed up numbers. But yeah, it just took it was a start and stop with a few different people, and it was more of a challenge than most of the turnkey deals on the backside.
So when you start and stop, you're going under contract, and then they're terminating a couple times. And are you lowering the price then? Are you still strong? Are you telling the seller, hey, look, I still believe in this number. We don't need to lower it? Or what was your advice?
It kind of depends on the deal. I mean, on this one in particular, we were still getting a ton of activity. So
I didn't need to lower it.
I think we made one price adjustment, but that was more to where I thought we should have started out personally. Okay. I want to be aggressive, but I also want to be kind of in the
realistic
world of reality with these things. And obviously I'd love to get everybody top dollar. Like that's great.
So what was the difference in what you listed at and what you ended up going under contract at?
We were listed at like 2,795. We went under contract at 275, and then I think we had a $10,000 inspection objection.
So closed within what is that? 1.5% of list price?
Pretty close to. And did it in 45 days.
Oh wow.
With a loan. during the middle of the holidays, Christmas and New Year's.
So this was just 2020. So it's recently closed?
Yeah, closed January 20th. And that was
Wow.
actually 10 days after we were supposed to close because we didn't order the payoff from the lender.
A lot of things happen. There's a lot
Whoops.
going on in the holidays. So that was really interesting. Love to hear the background and full story from the broker's perspective, which we haven't had before. So as we're, wrapping this up, we talked about mentors. Talk to me about one of the other things that Chris and I love to talk about is, what would you consider as one of your superpowers? Like, what is the thing that you think separates you from other brokers, managing brokers, guys that are partners in large brokerages? You've done hundreds, thousands of deals in the multifamily space, hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you think as you look back, you'd attribute that to that Chris and I called your superpower?
I'll answer that in two parts. I think how I separated myself in the beginning of my career, I knew the market better than anybody. I came in every morning. I looked at what's traded in the last week because, they lag on updating the website. So I would look back 14 days. And obviously I knew what we were transacting on, but I needed to know what everybody was transacting on. So I knew who bought it. I know who sold it. I know what it sold for. I know why it sold. I called each one of the parties that did the transaction, pinged questions. Why'd you sell? What are you doing now? What, buyer, why did you buy this? What was attracted to this? And so I knew the market really well. I think that was my superpower, if you will, as you guys call it, was just understanding the market and what's going on and who's playing in it and why, and different submarkets and why people are attracted to it.
And you did that by calling the buyers and sellers, not the agents on the deals, or did you call everyone?
Well, mostly buyers and sellers because we probably knew them anyway, even though we were maybe not the transaction people.
Okay.
We were probably actively talking to them anyway. And so I just knew the market really well. And I knew the buildings, and I have a trouble remembering my father and mother's birthdays, but I can remember the last 3 owners of a particular apartment building, what it traded for, and when. And it's just that's my thing. My wife drives around town because I like to look at apartment buildings and write addresses down. Still, you go anywhere. We go to Salt Lake, and I'm just like, look at that building. Look at that building. I just like looking at apartment buildings. Superpower as a managing broker and owner of a company. I don't know. I think it's just understanding where people are coming from and understanding that this business is not easy, and there's a lot of hurdles to it. There's a lot of times when you're doubting yourself. There was a time, 3 years in, where I'm just like, is this for me? Got a few big deals under contract, had some big paydays coming, and they all fell apart. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah. When did you hit traction? Because with any business, especially being an agent, whether you're residential or commercial, there's that 1, 2, 3, 4 year, you got to grind, and you're not getting paid a high salary, high amount for that. How many years in did you like, hey, I hit it. This is good. This is what I'm doing. It makes sense.
So funny story. And my wife just told us this weekend, but I used to still go to Vail, which is where I used to live, on Saturdays, and bar back and be a door guy at my buddy's bar from like 2:30 to 2:30 on Saturdays, just to make enough money while I was beginning being a broker.
Wow.
Just so I could make $200 or $300 on a Saturday and come back and like have some beer money for the week or whatever. But for me, it wasn't until like years 4 and 5.
Okay.
Really? It took you 4 or 5 years?
Yep.
Yeah, because you were going through a really tough cycle in the market.
Challenging
so
time.
7, 8, 9, 10. So 10, 11 is when things you think started to pick up?
Which is obviously when the market started to pick up as well.
Right.
But you were putting the time in, and I mean, when you're putting the time in and the market goes your way, I mean, that's what led.
You're able to double down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then you have those relationships, and you're a trusted person at that point. When everybody else is getting in because it's good, you hopefully have a leg up on those people.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot shorter today. I've seen guys in our office like do really well inside of 2 years, like way better than I did inside of 5 years. And some of that's the market and debt and capital being readily available. But I still tell people if they ask me like, what's the ramp up? I'm like, it's a couple of years. And if you don't have a couple of years where the money socked away, and at least in commercial, then this is not the business for you. And that's why we don't get a lot of people that are my age getting into this business because they have a mortgage and they have 2 kids and, you know, they have
life expenses.
They have life expenses that are beyond what earning $0 for a year can afford. So that's why you see a lot of young people get into this business that are 24, 25, 26, because they can live cheaply and or get second jobs. I mean, one of my mentors delivered newspapers from like 3:30 to 6:30, and then he went to work.
Wow.
So, you know, a lot of people have stories like that.
I'm really glad you're talking about this because especially, you know, it's always been the case, but now with social media and the internet, just like you go on there and it can be an emotional roller coaster because everyone's, I mean, they're doing more stuff with their families, they're having more success, they're having all this stuff. All you see is the good stuff, but you don't see that grind and the putting the time in and, hey, I'm gonna wake up at 3:00 and do this job so I can make $50 for a day to pay the bills and do all that. Like, I'm really glad you talked about that because it gives people a really good perspective, and that's part of the journey. That's part of the process.
Yeah. And I think it's the same way on the investing side. Very few people come in and buy 150 unit day one and hit a home run. It's just not, maybe that's what you see on LinkedIn posts or social media or whatever, but that guy started or girl started a long time ago and probably doing single families or fourplexes or something where they grinded it out and probably lost money on deals and had to learn some hard lessons to get to that point. And so it's a grind. It's not an easy business. It's a roller coaster. You have good months, you have bad months. You have to learn how to budget money because obviously money comes in waves. And, so it's not for everybody. It looks sexy from the outside, but it's not for everybody. And phone never stops. That's my wife's biggest complaint is your phone never stops, but that's
money
life.
calling.
Yeah.
Opportunities knocking. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's what we talked about. We talk about it so many times, Chris, just patience and mastering the fundamentals. You have to master the fundamentals, which no one wants to talk about. No one wants to sit in their basement, just dribble a basketball and work on bounce passes against the wall. But that's how you get to playing in, the state championship game in front of thousands of people, is doing those things that are boring, not sexy, and just mastering, those things from sports. And then same thing in business and real estate is you spend the time when no one's watching on Saturdays, Sundays, or after 7 p.m., when everyone else is hanging out, watching the game or partying, and you're in there looking at spreadsheets, looking at numbers, looking at sales comps, doing rent comps, all those things that no one really wants to do, but that are the fundamentals to knowing the business. So I think that's a phenomenal story. It's definitely, what I can relate to. Chris can relate to that as well. And, there's so much wisdom packed in there that, I hope people go back and listen to that. And anyone looking to get into brokerage, I hope understands that, it's a 2 or 3 or 4 year journey. But if you do it, it can be really rewarding, both, from a fulfillment standpoint and then also financially.
Yeah. And I think the fulfillment standpoint, growing guys and girls and investors' personal wealth. I mean, it's been incredible to see the journey of that with some people. I took a client that owned a 10 unit. He'd owned it free and clear. He was very risk adverse. And from a 10 to a 42 to a 42 to an 80 to a refi and a couple other 20 units. And his cash flow is 20 times what it was, and his equity is 10 times what it was.
Wow.
And that's something his grandkids be thanking you for.
Yeah. I mean, I know his kids at this point,
Wow.
so
that's cool.
So that changed his, I mean, not that he, was poor or anything to start with, but like that changed his life. And so that's a client for life for me. It's just been awesome to watch that journey. And it took me meeting with him once a quarter for 4 years before he did anything.
Yeah. Which is a ton of work and probably exhausting. You're probably thinking, man, what am I doing? I've spent 4 years with this guy and not made $1. And what am I? Is this ever going to end?
Yeah. It's a long game.
Yeah, the long
Adam,
game.
this has been phenomenal, man. So where can people find you? Obviously, you're transitioning from Nexus to Capstone now. Where can people find you? Website, social media? We'll put in the show notes, but
Shockingly enough, I'm not a big social media person. LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I've actually never had any other social media in my life besides LinkedIn.
Like ever?
Ever.
Wow.
You picked the right one for real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn, our website, capstonecompanies.com. I think we've given out my email, but Riddle, Riddle at capstone-companies.com is the new email. I guess when this comes out in a few months, we'll be using that one. So always happy to chat about the market, what's going on, what I see. and learning about a lot of new markets now with this merger. So in a month or so, having a bunch of people come out and learn about Nashville and Cincinnati and Charlotte and kind of expanding the knowledge into some other markets. So
that's
looking forward
huge.
to that.
Yeah, I've actually personally done a bunch of deals with Adam and Nexus and can't speak highly enough about just their ability to find the right product and really represent buyers and sellers really well. So anyone looking to buy or sell in Denver or any of the markets that Capstone's in, highly recommend them. And they do a great job. And I'm hoping that, a lot of people are going to hit you up and you're going to be able to continue to grow your business.
I appreciate that. We look forward to it.
All right, Adam, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
Join the conversation.